Hello, I'm Ben and you're watching The PhD Parent. So this video is easy to sum up. There's a pretty good chance that becoming pregnant is going to stuff up your sleep. So in the following, I'm going to review research that's investigated the impact of pregnancy on sleep by looking at the presence of sleep problems, that is insomnia symptoms, during pregnancy, and then consider research that's dived more specifically into the amount of sleep and quality of sleep that women get during pregnancy. So here we go, starting with insomnia symptoms during pregnancy. So a bunch of studies have investigated sleep problems during pregnancy. The common approach adopted in these studies has been to look at the prevalence of high levels of insomnia symptoms among pregnant women. Such symptoms include difficulty getting to sleep, difficulty staying asleep, or waking up before you want to and not being able to get back to sleep. The findings of these studies have been synthesized in a recent meta-analysis by Sedov. These researchers reviewed 24 studies involving over 15,500 women and found that across pregnancy, about 40% of women experience high levels of insomnia symptoms. Interestingly, the researchers found that pregnancy trimester moderated this effect. This means that the prevalence of insomnia symptoms differed depending upon the trimester of pregnancy that women were in. Specifically, the prevalence of high levels of insomnia symptoms was greatest in the third trimester, being a bit under 40%, with the prevalence of such symptoms being around 25% in both the first and second trimesters. Thus, the results of this meta-analysis clearly show that sleep problems are very common for women during pregnancy and tend to get worse as pregnancy progresses. Now, given these findings, the question you might ask is what happens to insomnia symptoms following birth? Well, Siverston looked at the trajectory of insomnia symptoms during pregnancy and following birth in a sample of about 1,500 women. Insomnia symptoms were assessed when women were 32 weeks pregnant, 8 weeks post-birth, and again 2 years post-birth. Across the whole sample, Siverston found that the prevalence of high levels of insomnia symptoms was around 60% at week 32 of pregnancy and also 8 weeks following birth, before decreasing to around 40% 2 years post-birth. Of relevance, when they looked at women who experienced high levels of insomnia symptoms during pregnancy, they found that about 40% continued to have these symptoms at each of the 2 subsequent assessment points. About 30% continued to experience insomnia symptoms 8 weeks after birth, but had recovered 2 years later, and about 20% did not report any insomnia symptoms at any point post-birth. The rest reported no symptoms at 8 weeks post-birth, but reported symptoms at the final assessment 2 years later. Now, Siverston didn't measure insomnia symptoms pre-pregnancy, so it's possible that the reported symptoms had nothing to do with pregnancy. But assuming that for a sizable proportion of women, their insomnia emerged during pregnancy, the results of this study suggest that pregnancy-related insomnia symptoms can become a lasting problem. Now, while these studies show that sleep problems are common in pregnant women, talking about insomnia symptoms is a little bit vague and probably not how people think about sleep in everyday terms. So in the following, I'll describe the results of studies that have looked at the amount and quality of sleep during pregnancy. So first of all, the amount of sleep during pregnancy. The benchmark to keep in mind for the following is that according to recommendations, adults should get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. So research in this area has adopted 2 approaches to assess sleep duration. One approach has been to use self-reports of sleep duration, and the other has been to use objective assessment, for example, polysomnography or actigraphy. If you want to know more about these approaches, then you can check out my video in the link below. The most common approach has been to use self-reports of sleep, so I'll start with that. I came across a few studies, but didn't find a meta-analysis summarizing these, so I ran one of my own. I ended up with 7 studies, which across them involved about 7,500 women. I'm sure there are other studies out there, but this will do. Sleep assessments usually took place when women were 28 plus weeks pregnant. So according to my results, on average, women get about 7 hours and 20 minutes of sleep at night when they're pregnant, which is at the lower end of the recommended number of hours of sleep for adults. Now bear in mind, this is just an average. Some women will be getting more sleep than this, but others will be getting less. Complementing these self-report studies are others that have instead used objective measures of sleep. For example, polysomnography or actigraphy. Fewer studies have used these approaches compared to self-report approaches, probably because they're more expensive and time-intensive. And again, I couldn't find a meta-analysis of the findings, so I ran my own. I came across 4 studies involving about 300 women, with sleep assessments usually occurring again when women were 28 plus weeks pregnant. And once more, I'm sure I missed some studies. So the results I got were that, on average, women get about 6 hours and 25 minutes of sleep at night when they're pregnant. As you can see, when assessed using these objective measures, average sleep duration was lower than when assessed using self-report. This reflects the fact that when sleep was assessed using polysomnography, average sleep duration was particularly low. But when assessed using actigraphy, it was almost the same as what you get with self-report. And there may be two reasons for this. First, when sleep is assessed using polysomnography, you're hooked up to a bunch of machines in a lab environment. This is not conducive to a good night's sleep at the best of times, let alone when pregnant. Second, when using polysomnography, sleep is measured over only one night, so may not be representative of a person's broader patterns of sleep. So I reckon on balance, somewhere around 7 hours a night is not a bad estimate for the average amount of sleep that women get during pregnancy. Now, one issue with these previous studies is that they can only tell you how much sleep women get during pregnancy, but what you might want to know is the amount of sleep you lose when you become pregnant. That is, during pregnancy, how much does the amount of sleep decrease compared to pre-pregnancy? I found 4 studies, each of which relied upon self-report measures of sleep, that examined this issue. And again, I ran my own meta-analysis of the findings. What I found was that, as a result of becoming pregnant, the average amount of sleep women lose is around 50 minutes a night, at least once they're in the 3rd trimester. Given by this late stage of pregnancy, when getting through the days is becoming harder and harder, that amount of sleep loss is certainly not going to help things. One of the interesting things is that some women end up sleeping more during pregnancy than before. This point was illustrated in studies by Plan-Kalane and Parvinen, who found that around 30% of women and around 40% of women, respectively, slept more during pregnancy than before. But that's enough about the amount of sleep during pregnancy. Now on to sleep quality. So it's one thing to get less sleep, but what can really knock you around is getting crappy sleep. So in the following, I'll discuss research that's looked at the quality of sleep that women get while pregnant. So as with sleep duration, researchers have used self-reports and objective assessment approaches, including polysomnography and actigraphy, to assess sleep quality in pregnant women. And when it comes to self-report, a common approach has been to have women complete the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, where poor sleep quality is indicated by a score of greater than 5. So SETO have conducted a meta-analysis of studies using this approach to estimate the percentage of women who experience poor sleep quality during pregnancy. Their meta-analysis considered 24 studies involving over 11,000 women. They found that about 45% of women experience poor sleep quality during pregnancy. And further, sleep quality tends to be at its worst during the 3rd trimester, and poor sleep quality is more of an issue the older you are. Now, as mentioned, other studies have used objective measures of sleep quality, and I'll tell you about a couple. One study I liked was by Wilson, who, using polysomnography, assessed sleep quality in 24 non-pregnant women, 21 women in their 1st trimester of pregnancy, and 27 women in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Slightly small samples and only 1 night of sleep assessment, but the good thing about this study was that it involved comparison with non-pregnant women. The researchers computed a bunch of measures of sleep quality, but here are 2 important ones they looked at. First was sleep efficiency. This is the percentage of total time in bed that you're asleep. So for example, if you're in bed for 10 hours and asleep for 8 hours, your sleep efficiency would be 80%. A sleep efficiency of greater than 85% is taken to represent good sleep quality, and a sleep efficiency of less than 75% poor sleep quality. The other measure they looked at was wake after sleep onset, or WASO. This is the amount of time that you are awake after initially having gone to sleep and before getting up. So a WASO of less than 20 minutes is taken to represent good sleep quality, and a WASO of greater than 40 minutes, poor sleep quality. So here's what Wilson found. As you can see, by the 3rd trimester, pregnant women were in the ballpark of poor sleep quality in terms of sleep efficiency and were well past the criterion in terms of WASO. Similar results were found by Belsarak, with the findings from these studies corroborating the results of self-report studies, and showing quite vividly that the later stages of pregnancy in particular are characterized by poor sleep quality. And when it comes to the factors that pregnant women describe as stopping up the quality of their sleep, Hutchinson and Mindell found that physical discomfort, having to pee frequently, pain, thinking too much, heartburn, being too hot, and trouble breathing each contribute. Though the first 2, discomfort and having to pee, were the major issues. Not really a pleasure to look forward to. So that's it for sleep during pregnancy. If there's anything I've gotten wrong, any important research I've overlooked, or if you have any questions, then feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, happy parenting.